Chapter 3: The Geopolitics of Mosul and the Mandate. Remember how Mosul was awarded to France under the Sykes-Picot Agreement? Well, by 1918, that stood in the way of Britain realizing her new plans for Mesopotamia. Mosul, with its oil and diverse population, was an important component of Britain's future in the region. The war years did two things for the British mindset towards empire in the Middle East. One, it stretched the British nearly to their breaking point, and by 1918 left the home front crushed with debt and forced to grapple with an entire generation scarred or lost to a war fought on foreign fronts. Two, the mechanics of the war catapulted oil from a minor resource to an essential commodity. These two intersected powerfully in Mosul. British success politically and militarily, and later economically, depended on keeping Mosul within Mesopotamia. Mosul thus evolved from being a military target in the north of Mesopotamia to a political and economic jewel. In the final months of the war, a messy campaign was fought between the British and Ottomans that saw the British seize control of the city in the final hours of the war, literally. However, British possession and control over Mosul contradicted what France had agreed to under the Sykes-Picot Agreement. The Ottomans also argued that the last-minute British maneuver to seize the city contradicted terms laid out under the Armistice of Mudros. Though Britain had finally captured Mosul by November 1918, the real fight for her control over the city, its oil, and indeed the entirety of Mesopotamia was really just beginning. In December, British Prime Minister Lloyd George and French Premier Georges Clemenceau met in London to discuss revised plans for the post-war order. Among the various topics discussed was the transfer of Mosul from the French sphere of influence to the British one, thereby amending the terms of the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Clemenceau agreed to this transfer on three conditions, which ensured British support for French claims elsewhere in the region, as well as for a share of Mosul's oil. The Paris Peace Conference opened in January 1919 and quickly descended into chaos. Britain's attitude towards empire had shifted from one of maintaining the status quo to one gripped by expansionist zeal. American President Woodrow Wilson, cognizant of an impending European land grab, advocated for a mandate system that ensured oversight from colonial exploitation and the eventual self-sufficiency and sovereignty of former Ottoman lands. This mandate system complicated French aspirations. The emergence of Emir Faisal, listed on the left, as a protege of the British and the potential for a British client state in Syria also alarmed the French. In a series of articles, French newspapers tried to undermine and demonize Faisal and his claim to rule, while also smearing British policymakers and their aspirations in the Middle East. French attempts within the conference sessions to derail British plans also failed. In February, a series of heated remarks led Lloyd George to deny that he had supported France's claim to the mandate for Syria, although he had. This denial was fueled by the fact that Britain had promised Hussein, Faisal's father, an Arab state in exchange for his support against the Ottomans during the war. Denying France a future in Syria would appease the Arabs Britain appeared to have double-crossed. Moreover, it was predominantly the British, not the French, who organized and fought in Syria. This explosive reversal of Lloyd George's and Clemenceau's December tête-à-tête led President Wilson to suggest that a commission be sent to Syria and Mesopotamia to ascertain the wishes of the people there. Since negotiations between the French and British had finally broken down by May, a commission composed of two Americans, Henry King and Charles Crane, was sent to the disputed regions. In August, the commission presented their findings and recommended that Britain be awarded the mandate for Mesopotamia, including the province of Mosul. Separate from the Paris Peace Conference discussions, by December 1919, British Minister of Petroleum Affairs Sir Hamar Greenwood and French Senator Henri Béranger initialed an agreement that awarded France a 25% stake in the Turkish Petroleum Company. This agreement formed the foundation of the San Remo Agreement and allowed the two countries to resume a friendly relationship. The mandates were officially assigned at the San Remo Conference of April 1920 and legally awarded to France and Britain under the Treaty of Sèvres in August 1920. These agreements, however, did not sit well with the Iraqis. Within a matter of weeks, the rising nationalist sentiments in Baghdad and elsewhere in Mesopotamia erupted into a revolt. The uprising was primarily concentrated in the middle of the Euphrates region, home to a large Shia community, as well as in the Mosul Vilayet or province in the north. In particular, the Kurds were incensed that their prospect for autonomy, outlined in the Treaty of Sèvres, was being abandoned. The widespread and aggressive nature of the uprising forced the British to send additional troops and resources to Mesopotamia. Churchill directed the RAF to bomb rebel encampments, paving the way for future air policing of the region. By October, there were over 100,000 British troops stationed in the Mandate. The revolt also forced a shift in outlook among the British. It undermined the importance of solving the Kurdish question and further exposed just how costly holding on Mesopotamia could be. With conflict ripping through Mesopotamia and popular contempt for the cost of imperialism at home, the Cairo Conference was convened to develop a coherent strategy for Britain's future in the Middle East. In addition to discussing Britain's policy towards France and the Levant, policy in Palestine, and the futures of Ibn Saud and Sharif Hussein, the conference of March 1921 also determined the pattern of Mesopotamian government until the end of the Mandate in 1932. Winston Churchill chaired the conference and was tasked with developing a policy to ensure British imperial control of the Middle East while also reducing the burden of that control. The decision was made to install Faisal as king of Mesopotamia. While these controversies were settled, the British still had to contend with the problem posed by Turkey. The new Turkish state, under Mustafa Kemal, refused to accept the terms of the Treaty of Sèvres, which defined the borders for the Mesopotamian state. Turkey argued that the Kurdish people were Turks, not Arabs, and since they formed the majority of Mosul's population, the region should be counted as part of Turkey. Britain pushed back on this, and the matter was eventually taken up by the League of Nations. In September 1924, the League established the Versen Committee to investigate the dispute and provide recommendations. A year later, the committee delivered its 90-page report, which recommended the Brussels Line, a demarcation that awarded Mosul to Mesopotamia, not Turkey. Turkey reluctantly accepted the findings of the committee, and the Treaty of Ankara finally settled the Mosul question dispute. This period in Mesopotamian history, beginning with Britain's march to Mosul and concluding with the 1926 Treaty of Ankara, forced Britain to reassess its plan in Mesopotamia and its attitude toward empire more broadly.